and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, Britain's largest professional trade union for staff working in prisons and correctional centres, public and private mental health service trust providers, and immigration services, with nearly 35,000 members. In this episode, National Chair Mark Fairhurst reviews the relationship between the union and the government 1 year into the life of the new administration. From the perspective of the prison service, Mark outlines why he feels a welcome change in attitude has led to progress being made in some areas, from the trial of tasers to better provision of personal protective equipment. However, on major issues such as retirement age and the right to strike, the situation is more challenging. Mark nevertheless is optimistic that the union's view will eventually prevail. So, Mark, I suppose perhaps the most noticeable change between this government and its predecessor is that they seem to be listening a lot more, even if they're not necessarily acting on what they're hearing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think what's gone on over the last 12 months would back that up. We've always had positive relationships, no matter what the government in power is at the time, with prisons ministers and secretaries of state. But this particular secretary of state, she seems to be listening intently to what we say and acting with urgency, which is a refreshing change, particularly when it comes to personal body armour, the tactical use of taser, which is getting trialled at the moment. And I think it shouldn't take headlines for our employer, people in highly paid director positions, to try and convince government that actually the POA are talking sense on this issue when we ask for all this personal protective equipment. I mean, the rollout of PAVA in the youth custody estate, they're the most violent estate in the country of anywhere, more violent than adults. We've had some horrific assaults, prisoner on prisoner, prisoner on staff, and they finally agreed to give us PAVA, which is quite significant, I think, because when you look at James Timpson, the prisons minister, he's the ex-head of the Prison Reform Trust and was dead against PAVA because you're using it, well, officially you're using it on children, though if you talk to my members who work with these children, they're anything but children in law and in name, but not by their actions and not by their builds and the strength they've got and the excessive violence they offer. He was dead against it. So he's made a lot of enemies where formerly he had a lot of friends, because he now agrees that people working with children should be able to use PAVA. And that's because he's viewed the same evidence that we have, the CCTV. He's looked at the stats, the horrific assaults on staff, the horrific assaults children on children. It was only a matter of time before someone lost their life. And that's a headline nobody wants. So they are listening, they are acting rapidly, but the government on a whole over the last 12 months, is there anything complimentary we can actually say? You know, the majority of the country elected a Labour government with loads of hope and aspirations, and we all finally thought, this is it, we're getting our country back on track. And what have they done? They've attacked the people who voted them in.
If you're in government, you'd feel very challenged, at least I hope you would anyway, at the moment. But if the Secretary of State, Shabina Mahmood, is in listening mode and kind of basically gets it, does that mean the blockage is kind of elsewhere? Either lower down the food chain, if you like, with prison governors, or higher up the food chain with the Treasury?
Well, I think her opinion is set in stone on our right to strike. She's adamant that she can defend the government's position in the European Court. Well, that remains to be seen.
Well, she's going to get a chance to do that relatively soon, isn't she?
Well,
As the case moves forward.
we hope so, because as you know, the backlog in the European Court, you tend to wait years and years for a trial date. And they actually have written to both parties and encouraged the government to sit down with this union and come to an agreement to avoid court action. And her stance was, we will defend our position in court. Well, that's fine. But you can't have it every way. This is what really annoys me. You can't say to us in one breath, you're that important to national security and the protection of the public that we couldn't possibly allow you to go on strike, similar to the police and the armed forces. And then in the next breath say, but actually, you're not that important at all that you can work until you're 68 years of age. in the most hostile and violent workplace of anywhere in the world. So 18-year-olds joining a job today would have to work for 50 years in that environment to enjoy a full career and a full pension. But if you joined as an 18-year-old recruiting the police, you'd only have to work for 30. If you were an 18-year-old recruiting the fire service, you would only have to work for 30. And if you were a 16-year-old recruiting the army, your full career in the army is 22 years. So you can't have it every way.
And I suppose that very obvious unfairness and inequality is quite corrosive, isn't it, in terms of the negotiating environment as a whole? Because while there are things like the rollout of PAVA, while there is a commitment in words to the prison service being a top priority, there's a gap, isn't there, between what's being said and what's being done or not done?
Previous governments, whenever we've tackled this issue with them, they've always hit us with the same cut and paste letters and statements that they compare us to seafarers, and the police and the fire service are more likely to lose their lives on duty because of their dangerous occupations. You can't say that about a prison officer anymore. We had 3 members of staff at Franklin nearly murdered on duty. We'd have staff at Whitemore nearly murdered on duty. We've had a prisoner at Belmarsh convicted of attempted murder of a prison officer. Our work is becoming more and more dangerous on a well, it's exceeded the level that I think that the police deal with, because the police, every single shift, may not be subject to violence and threats. They may have some pleasant duties to perform. We are every single day. Threats, assault, violence, trauma, suicide, self-harm. Every single day we face that. So there is a comparison now. So you can't use that argument. And if I was going to get any positive from the last 12 months of this government, it'd have to be what they've done with the prison service. They've increased the funding on the spending review because we desperately need to refurbish our jails. They've done that. They give us extra money for security. They give us personal body armour in high-risk areas in the high security estate. The trial and taser, they've given us PAVA in the YCS estate. And the door is still wide open on lowering our retirement age. They are going to get back to us because they're doing their own calculations on how much that's going to cost. But the stumbling block above Shabana Mahmood, which it always has been with every Secretary of State, is the Treasury. And the state of the country's finances at the moment, it's going to be very difficult to persuade the government to lower our retirement age. But on a plus point, if they're currently reviewing state pension age and there's rumours that it's going to go above 70, now come on. Anyone with an iota of common sense must realise, well, for one, you can't work as a prison officer till you're 68. You certainly can't do it till you're 70. So common sense has got to prevail. We are a unique occupation in a very unique environment. And our retirement age has always been lower than everybody else. We used to have a retirement age of 55, and we've always had exemptions. So it makes sense for me. And obviously the membership would decide if we ever got an offer. They would decide if they accepted it or not. But I think a common sense approach would be to say to prison officers, we're going to give you a flexible retirement age. So once you reach the age of 60, you can retire if you wish, but there will be no reduction in your pension that you've accrued. So you could have 2 pensions, you could have 3. Most of us have got 2. If you decide to retire, then we're not going to reduce your pension that you've accrued simply because you're taking it early. I think that would be a sensible approach, because those of us who've had enough would work until we're 60, then go and take what we've accrued. And those of us, for whatever reason, who need to carry on working or wish to carry on working, could. So I think that would be a really sensible option.
What's not to like about that? Do you feel that there are any other levers that the union has that it's able to bring pressure to bear on government? If you've got James Timpson changing his stance on something that for him, I imagine, was quite a significant issue, and was a significant issue in itself. If you've got the Secretary of State who's listening, are there levers that the union has or is contemplating, if you're able to share that, to increase the pressure on the very centre of government where the hold-up seems to be?
I think we're doing all we can, especially when it comes to retirement age. I think the results speak for themselves. We're basing our argument on factual evidence and the real risks to staff. That's why we've got so much personal protective equipment and got such a rapid review of everything that has happened in the past couple of months. I think we've got the media on our side. I think we've definitely got the general public on our side because we're always in the spotlight now, most of the time for the wrong reasons. But look, we've got to bear that pressure on the government, and there's got to come a time where common sense prevails and people in Treasury have to admit if they've got any iota of common sense at all, they have to admit that we can't expect these public servants to work in that environment with everything that's going on in the 60s. It's just not practical. And it probably saved the taxpayer long term because most of the experienced cohort of staff who leave probably leave on ill health retirement or medical inefficiency and get compensation payment anyway. So would it not be more productive and cost efficient to try and keep those people till at least the 60th birthday, and then they just go anyway and take what they've accrued without you having to compensate them? That makes more sense to me.
Indeed, indeed. So, in terms of when we look ahead, if we were to reconvene this discussion in 12 months' time and have a 2-year review, it does seem that the pressure that's building on the government to really act on this is nigh unstoppable because the cause is so well argued and so obvious. If you're in the business of being a trade unionist, you've always got to be optimistic. Are you?
I've always been optimistic about lowering the retirement age for my members because it's absolutely nonsensical to expect us to work until we're 68. So I've always thought that one day common sense will prevail because I've never met a politician who thinks that a prison officer should work until they're 68. Not a single one, not one of any political persuasion, not anybody at all has ever said, well, I think you should work till you're 68. So that's why I am optimistic. And I think the way the Treasury are, there has to come a point in time eventually where they say, yeah, okay, fair enough. That's an argument we can't ignore. The job is becoming inherently more dangerous. People get health conditions of a variety of things, age 50 plus. What's it going to be like in your 60s? Yeah, people are living longer. Health is better. Technology advances and cures keep popping up for various illnesses. But you're talking about not just physical stuff, you're talking about the mental effect it has on you as well and the trauma you deal with. So that's why I'm so optimistic. What's going to happen in the next 12 months? Well, I fully expect us to carry on engaging with the government. They'll hit us with their own calculations, and then there'll have to be a business case put to Treasury. And with all the pressure that we're bearing on people and with all the support we've got, I am hopeful that we can actually break that link between state pension age and retirement age of prison officers. But the ultimate one for me is the membership. If we get an offer, it won't be me who decides, it'll be the membership that decide and
Of
democracy will
course.
rule. But we're
Of
certainly doing all we can. We're doing our best, and I will not rest until I get that retirement age down.
Right. And in the meantime, there is some what you might call lower lying fruit, isn't there? The review and the removal of razors from the estate is carrying on. You mentioned the taser trial. There's the opportunity for the government to make good on its promise to have a big insourcing drive when it comes to prison maintenance. There's plenty to occupy the negotiating agenda sitting underneath the retirement age and the right to strike.
Yeah, there's loads going on at the moment. Obviously, we are now looking ahead towards next year's pay awards and what we're going to ask for on that. With the latest announcement on the change to immigration rules, where the threshold
Mm,
for salaries is increased to 41,000. Well, newly recruit prison officers get nowhere near that. So we're now worried about our colleagues from overseas whose visas are running out. They don't earn enough money as a prison officer. What's going to happen to them? We've asked for an exemption. We've written to the government. We're still waiting for a reply. But if we have to ask the pay everybody to increase the starting salary of prison officers to 41,000 to compensate for that change in legislation, then that's what we're going to have to do.
yeah.
And why shouldn't prison officers have a starting salary of 41,000 for the dangers they face and the job they do? I think we should be rewarded for what we do, and maybe we wouldn't lose so many experienced staff or so many staff within the first 2 years of joining a job. Pay us what we're worth.
And I suppose to round off the discussion for the time being, it's all a question of value, isn't it? What is the value that a prison officer brings to their job, to the justice system, to society? What is the value with which they are regarded by the employer and the government? And it seems that the dial has shifted over the last year, but by no means enough.
Yeah, it is shifted. Public are becoming more aware because we're in the media a lot more. But my members will tell you that they still feel part of the forgotten service. That's what we've always classed ourselves as, because behind that big grey wall, people don't get to know what goes on. Without us, what would happen then? That's why we haven't got the right to strike, because we're that important to national security. Well, pay us as if we're that important then.
Yeah. And if the Chancellor or any of the Treasury Select Committee or any of the Treasury team wanted to see for themselves what life was like on the inside, I'm sure arrangements could be made for that.
Well, I'll take anyone round who wants to go round, but it won't be a prison that's stable and got good staffing levels. It'll be a prison that's got high levels of violence, low staff morale, and struggles every day to run a regime, because they need to see the reality. But I'll sit down with any Treasury official whenever they invite me into their office in Whitehall. I'll sit down with them any day of the week and put my case forward for a low retirement age. And I tell you what, after half an hour listening to me, they'd be hard pushed to say you don't deserve to retire a lot earlier than you do
For
at this
sure.
moment in time.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Sincere thanks as ever to Mark Fairhurst. You can keep up to date with the latest news and briefings from your union by visiting poauk.org.uk, where you can also find information on how to join the union should you not already be a member. Thank you for listening. We hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.